Hi, I'm Mary Gagler. I'm the director of Amos Eno Gallery, and I'm here today with Nishiki Sugawara-Beda. And I'm excited to be here with you today and to see a little bit of the inside of your studio. So welcome, Nishiki. Thanks for being here.
Well, thank you for having me.
So there's, we have a good start here to our interview because I know just a little bit about your practice. We can see a little bit of the works on view behind you, but can you just give us a brief description of your materials, maybe?
Yeah. So I am using sumi ink right now, and sumi is a soot and animal glue. Put them together and make a stick and make with water grind. I can show you a little later, but that's how you make a sumi ink, and that's something the ink traditionally used in Asian, mostly Eastern Asian countries for drawing and painting. And just because my research interest is in tracing back Japanese traditional activities, and the sumi is one of the materials that I got really interested in. So I'm using sumi, and these work that you see in the back are pretty small, and usually sumi is used on paper, but I use handmade gesso as a ground, and that's where I am right now.
Oh, okay. Yeah, that's great. I guess in terms of traditional uses of sumi ink, so one of the traditional uses is calligraphy. Is that right?
Yes.
And that's a big part of your practice, as I understand.
Yeah, that's almost like a foundation. I used to use calligraphy like as as a shape too, and as a vehicle to transmit the meaning of the like it's some sort of a meaning through character to a surface, and I was using the characters to describe it and borrowing the shape to transmit the meaning. Yeah, probably a couple of years ago that the use of actual characters dropped, but the way I approach mug making still remains the main sort of a core.
So you've left behind the characters and you've entered more of an abstraction phase, would you say?
Yeah, even though I was using characters, it was highly abstracted. Or if you know Japanese characters or Chinese characters, you might be able to decode my paintings, but it was not my purpose to actually write. I was just borrowing the shape, the way to go the strokes, order of strokes. So now it drops, and the main purpose of transmitting the feeling and sort of spiritually engaged mug making remains the same. And when you mentioned abstract, it is abstract image, but to me it is it's some sort of landscape right now. You can see those images. It's in a landscape format, and I was not really noticing that first, but then as I was just looking through it, it just over a sudden like, oh, that's a landscape. And that's how I started seeing my paintings and how I started organizing my pictorial space. So what I'm going after is right now to create a spiritual landscape, but but not for me, for someone to sort of to think about it. I mean, it's not about specific place.
So I wanted to ask you about if you could tell us more about that transition from calligraphy and to abstraction, or just if you can tell us more about that relationship.
Yeah. So actually, abstraction. Actually, I have to start from pretty like far back. Maybe 10, just about 10 years ago. Or a little more than 10 years ago, I was, entering my graduate school, and I was representing something. And then one of the teacher, professor just mentioned that, oh, you are an abstract painter. All of a sudden she labeled me. And then this was like first time that somebody actually called me an abstract painter. And at that point, I was representing something. So I was not thinking about abstract, because I want to show you. So this is something that calligraphy based. And yes, it is non-objective, and it's not I guess I was not thinking about it, but it is there's a sound, la, la, la. So I was going for a process of making decisions. And so this is the series from that. And I can't really see it. Oops, sorry. But basically, it's a syllable of la. Oops, I can't really see. If somebody can read the Japanese character, then they can read it's a la, 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 just 3 syllables. And but like I was actually borrowing the calligraphy or the shape of characters, and then transmitting the meaning or feeling of that phrase or characters to the surface. So that way I was not really sure about abstract, because I was representing something. But now, yes, it's abstract, but I'm still representing. So, but I started to accepting the idea of abstraction. And then right now, the more I look at it, those images in the back, there's a shape, it's pretty small, but rectangular, very landscape shape. And I remember it was my husband that just mentioned that landscape for whatever we were just conversing, and then that word hit me, and I was like, yes, that's it. That's that landscape is something that I'm painting, and so I'm representing a spiritual landscape. That's where I am at right now.
How interesting. So yeah, it almost seems like you went from something that it's almost like it wasn't quite abstraction, the la la la. It was an actual la la la. You were trying to get at something that was just totally ineffable. And paint it. And then yet again, with this idea of a spiritual landscape, you're trying to use a formal language to express, to show something that is not material.
Yeah, and I'm trying to like a sort of nudge in somebody's sort of image. Everybody has some sort of image for their own world. And then what I'm trying to do with this work, once I realized that, once I started to become conscious about landscape, I'm planning to make a lot, so that one work can maybe speak to a person. So that the reason that I'm trying to create a lot of works with those, small works, because this is actually this one, the one here. So it's really hand, you can just have it. And instead the viewing relationship would be really 1-to-1. Or maybe just one close to another, just maybe an intimate couple can just look at once. But basically, it is really a personal relationship with the work. And therefore, it really encourage the, I guess it allows the viewers to just go into their own head. And again, so the reason is that it's an interesting story. There's a shrine called Sanju Sangendo in Kyoto. And in that shrine, there are 1,001 statues. And because there are 1,000 of them, so each one of them is pretty big. And when I was, going to those places as a school children, the teachers, oftentimes they tell us that if you really look for, you can find your one. Maybe the one that is look like you, or maybe one that is really like about you, or something like that. So kind of the idea comes from that anecdote. So my hope is that I can just make a lot, maybe 1,000 one day, and so that somebody can just view those work, and one of them is going to be perfectly fit about what they were thinking on that day, maybe, or becomes a catalyst for them to just take away and then start forming their own, world. Not necessarily my image, but that can maybe enhance theirs, the world.
That's beautiful.
Mm.
Yeah, it's interesting to hear you describe that temple. It's one thing that struck me with within your statement was your description about the connections between cultures. So between cultures today, between the past and the present, and then this sort of getting at this core of humanity. Through that these connections are somehow indicative of a core of humanity, and that's such a powerful. That's so powerful that can be approached through a formal, through a visual language, and it sounds in a way like you're trying, that you can get at that by, trying to get at a universality by, going through. It almost sounds systematic, going through. And creating 1,000 paintings, so that
right. And oftentimes, I don't know, you just use the word universality, and this is something that I am aware of, and I would like to speak to the larger audience. For example, like if the work has the letters, maybe the letter is Roman characters, like English, maybe. Then, what if my mom, maybe she can read, but maybe she doesn't really, understand the context. And any work of art will have that limitation, for a certain group. And but I'm trying to limit that limitation, or minimize that limitation, but it is fully like very very much personal engagement, like from my personal sort of narratives inside, which is not going to be universal at all. So it's really interesting to think about. I want to reach all, but at the same time, it's all personal. Like it's myself. So my husband might not be able to understand, So I think it's interesting, sort of like a relationship between like, I want to be universal, but it's already really personal.
Yeah, right. Well, because there's I think you're expressing like a fundamental challenge with communication is that you start with yourself, and the goal is to reach others and to reach themselves. So yeah, it's this like widening out and coming back in. But I guess, it would be so great to just see if we could see one of your works up close and personal at this point.
Okay.
To see what this feels like to you, how this is represented.
Sure. But then like I feel like that would be like I'm exposing myself, you know, like any painting. So you'll be like almost all like, because all the little decisions are, you know, about or what decisions were made by me. So I feel that it's like everything is actually, you know, exposing myself. But so I don't think I can just say this stroke means something, you know.
Right.
But I can show you one of them that I just grabbed. Perhaps I could just talk about the wonder of sumi. This is 6 by 12 and it's pretty small, and a wooden panel. And you know, it's a gessoed surface. And gesso is made of, for this case, is the rabbit skin glue I wrote down on the back, talc, and titanium white. Some of them are different formula, but it's basically 4 or 5 layers of gesso and then sumi on top. And in sumi, I use about 10, 15 different kinds of sumi. For this case, I used 1, 2, 3 different kinds of sumi. I started writing down in the back, which is kind of like that. I don't know. It's kind of fun to keep a record. And some of them are shiny, if you can see. And some of them are more matte. And the colors are, some are more yellowy or brownish or warm, and some colors are cooler. But especially this area is much cooler because I lifted up some of the titanium white with sumi. So basically, I was wiping and then just kind of lifting that pigment up and mixed with the sumi, so it became more cloudy gray. Especially here, if you can see, that's a little bit more like cooler color than others. And even like in the same sumi, you can actually get different types of color by changing the ground or lifting things up and then sort of like mixing with the ground. So yeah.
Okay, well, thank you so much for showing us these intricacies. I mean, it's I can understand why you need to have that formula on the back of the work, because it is fascinating how different sumi inks are interacting, how the ground is lifting. I mean, I can't help but imagine a sort of some kind of metaphysical activity going on.
Right.
Because and then the finished work has that feel. But so can you tell us more about like where that's coming from? Like tell us more about your materials and what you're using these days.
Right. So I got interested in sumi, a couple of years ago, and I started using sumi, but the sumi that we can find in the United States in the sumi bottle, like in the bottle, is a very different thing. It's essentially just sumi-like ink. So I was not, I was aware, but I was not really sure what I really talking about. So that led me to research where sumi is made and how they were made, and who they are, who the makers are. So last year, 2019 summer, I visited Nara Nara, Japan, which is one of the 3 Asian capitals. So Osaka, Kyoto, probably it's a lot of people have heard of, and Nara is one of the like 3 Asian capitals, close to each other, and that's the place where 95% of Japanese sumi is still, produced or being produced. And so I really wanted to go. I just needed to go and researched some before I left. And I found a few sumi shops that I could visit. And so one of them is called Kobayan. And Kobayan is the only one that that produce their own soot. As soot is the main ingredients, for me, it's just I needed to see, and I just wanted to visit. The sumi soot is it's being produced or being created in a very tiny room, surprisingly. And tiny room, maybe 8 feet by 10 feet-ish, kind of small room, but 2 of them right next to each other, and one person really look after those 2 rooms. And each room has 100 tiny oil lamp, essentially, because the soot is a lamp black in English. Or it's called soot, but it's a lamp black. It's the same thing. But it really depends on how you burn and what you burn, and how they collect soot determines the color and the sizes of particles. And it just changes the tonality of black and depth of black. And it's really fascinating. So I am not going to just into whole details, but it was really interesting to see how they make, and I had to meet the maker as well. So that like the sumi that I use for this series of work, coming from 3 different shops. And all of them, I met the maker. And so to me, whenever I choose a sumi stick, I have the face of their maker in mind, and how we talked about, and that becomes part of my narratives in the painting. This is one sumi stick. 見えるかな? Oh, here. Do you see? This is Kobayan. And you grind with, I can't. So the sumi ink comes really from a sumi stick, and that stick is made of soot and animal glue kneaded together and put in some sort of a form, actually wooden mold. And then take it out, let it dry for about 6 months, and then becomes like this stick. This is just really a short version to explain sumi making process, but there's just so much more to it. But it comes in a paper wrap. I love these paper wrap because it's just individually, wrapped and like this, and it's just so beautiful. And this is called ikimatsu, shoenboku, and ikimatsu is it's a pine tree that was burned and then get the soot, and that's called ikimatsu shoen. And then this one is going to be maybe like that. This is oops, it's heavy. This is a grinding stone, and that's how I grind. And it's there is water, the pool of water already, but you just put the water, like using these kind of drop, and then grind. And usually people say that the strength of 5-year-old girl is perfect, perfect power. So just basically it's not too strong, not too light, but nice and consistent. I already made it. In order for you to make that amount of water with this stick for a really strong ink, like very dark black, it will take about 5 to 10 minutes. And then use a brush like that. Could be any brushes. And then we can draw. So this one is actually, I used it before, so it just dried up. Let me get this. So could be different types of mark making that you can do. I have these type of brushes. That's a really short version of hake. It's the hake. Very narrow one. I have wide one.
And what kind of bristles are those?
These are hog. These are actually sheep. And mountain hose. But what I'm using is the gessoed surface, so I can actually use a X-Acto knife. X-Acto knife to carve. So I can show you some carved surface. Hang on. So I just grabbed there. There. So when you curve or scratch the surface, it becomes like that. I don't know, can you see? This area is also curved surface or scratched surface. So subtle differences that you can make. Once you add sumi on the surface, like paper, you want you can't erase it. So in order for me to just lift some sumi out, I discovered that I can curve the surface to create not only the marks but also take that soot out.
In that work, it almost looks like the sumi collected in some of the carved marks. Mm-hmm. Is that right? Am I seeing that right?
Sumi collected. What do you mean by that?
It just like there are some very dark marks that look like those might be carved.
This one?
Further in.
It's a painted mark.
Okay. Interesting. Yeah, well, how lovely. It echoes the carved marks in this really unique way. Mm-hmm. Gosh, I'm just dying to see this in person.
I know. I really, really hope. We saw a show earlier this year, and my painting colleagues, they really enjoy, and some of them they just wonder how is it made. They really try to examine the surface, and it was really fun to explain. So.
One thing that I wanted to ask you about that's not in your studio Can you tell us about your installation practice and the importance of placement in that?
Right. Installation. Well, actually, I'm not really sure if I should call it myself installation artist. I have only one work that that has been shown, you know, 3 or 4 places, 4 venues, and that's an installation, or maybe a site specific. But it is the work that traveled to the specific venue, but it's called as Kotodama Converse. And Kotodama Converse consists of a sculpture like that big till maybe like that size, movie strip made of mesh wire and paper mache with actually this paper, rice paper, and then fashioned with the line of seals in the middle. And because it's movie a strip, it just continues. So each installation is about 60 to 100, and it looks like a sort of forest just coming from the ceiling or just floating. The basic idea is from calligraphy, actually. So you have a, you know, this is just a mark, but you have a work. But here is the seal, and a name, you know, like here. And that's just standard format. But for that sculpture, the calligraphy itself, like in the middle, is missing. Only the seals. So when the viewer or audience, perhaps I should call them participant, enter the sculptural forest, they become the content. So they essentially become the calligraphy, either physically or mentally. You know, so what they were thinking becomes the content because they are surrounded by a seals, and also yeah. So some sort of viewers spend some time underneath, laying down on the floor, and then sort of meditative, quiet time is, you know, something that they love to spend time. That actual work, or that actual, like, you know, each sculpture or one sculpture first, it really came from calligraphy. So calligraphy, I think I explained to you you are using the character and then transmitting the feeling or meaning of the character onto a paper, right? So, but at the end, it becomes on the 2D surface. And I just basically wanted to see a 3D format or 3D version of word spirit. So, you know, transmitting means like putting the spirit to it. So I wanted to see the spirit of the word or character, and that became a you know, movie strip. So essentially that the Kotodama Converse is full of floating spirit, but empty spirit, so that when you enter, it becomes one. You know? So that's the.
That's how interesting. Yeah, so I can see how it's not quite sculpture because because it's interactive. It's not. It's the content of the work isn't there until the person shows up and makes sense of the seals and where.
Mm-hmm.
So the seals are what make it a finished work. Like that's the indication that the work is finished. Yeah, that's so interesting. Well, so yeah, I know that there's the importance of placement and where the seals are, and it just sounds like this all connects to your project of connecting to spirit, connecting materials and a sort of spiritual like actuality
Mm-hmm.
in your work.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, yeah, yeah. I'm yeah. Spiritual is really an interesting word. You know, it can be just very mushy mushy area, but at the same time, we are all, like spiritual, like it's something higher, something, or like myself is. If I think that it's myself is just here only, then it's kind of boring. If I see myself here in the physical format, and maybe somewhere out there is just floating, maybe when I'm tired or when I'm happy, like a little thing is just floating off, or could be like I have a couple of spirits like floating around with me like a moon. Or when I think about it, it just makes it the things just fun.
That's so lovely. Well, I think that's a great note to end on, and I just want to thank you, Nishiki, for taking the time to talk with us and share your work with us today.
Thank you.
So, all right, happy quarantine.
Yes, you too. Be safe.